All right, welcome you guys. This is the first time I've tried to stream a Dungeon Masters class. Quite a few of you in here. Thank you for showing up. I appreciate it. Hopefully this is going to help you in the near future, learning how to run games and how the module and the fantasy grounds interface with one another. So I'm going to start off with just starting a new campaign. So give me one moment. We'll get that going. Okay, so hopefully I have a good visual with you guys. If I can get one of the moderators to hop in here and talk to me and let me know if I can be heard, if everyone can see what I'm doing, as right now my focus is on Fantasy Grounds and teaching you guys. So I'm going to wait about 10 seconds and see where we're at.
Okay, the stream's clear.
Okay. Okay. So first of all, when you're actually going to set up a campaign for yourself or for your group, I think a lot of people get confused. A campaign doesn't necessarily have to be a game or anything like that. It's just another way of creating a new folder or directory. It could mean a lot of different things, but in Fantasy Grounds, for me, it means I'm going to start a new session. And so I'm going to call this the Dungeon Master GM Fantasy Grounds live Twitch stream or something like that. So it doesn't really matter what you call it. I'm just going to give it an abbreviation or something so I can come back and recall this. Okay, so in the campaign name, I went ahead and typed that in, and that's basically what I'm going to use for this. I also have clicked and selected the 5e rule set. And then if you can see to the right here, I have a bunch of, let's see, extensions that I use for creating and for playing Fantasy Grounds. For right now, though, I think I'm just going to enable the 14-point clear font extension, in which we do have that available if you guys are interested. It helps some of us older guys see things like that. Also, this is where you create or generate an alias. You can do that here if you like. Also, you would run a test here for your connection to make sure that you're going through your firewall. And as you can see, mine was successful. Now, if you get a failure, you're going to have to work on getting your computer and your router and your internet service provider and your modem in sync. And that would entail port forwarding and things like that. And I'm pretty sure if you ask somebody in the Fantasy Grounds College, it can help you with that. Anyhow, let's get this started. If you want, you could put a password here. I'm not going to do that right now. So I'm going to start up the Fantasy Grounds interface. And depending on how much stuff you have in your directories is how much time it takes to load, I believe. And I have a ton of stuff, so mine usually takes anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes at the most to load. So if there's any questions about the campaign setup to this point, let me know. It's not a whole lot of interesting or new grounds for most of you, but if you've never done this before, that's the first step. You make a new campaign, you make sure it's whatever genre that you're working with, and then you select any of your extensions or add-ons, and then you hit go and start, and there you go. So, anyways, here's the campaign setup window. This is something that Fantasy Grounds has included so that it makes it easier for people to activate their modules, things like that. And that's what this is all about. I tend to close this. I'm so used to doing it the old way, but you can actually activate your modules from here, and it's pretty a nice little handy little pop-up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that from here. Okay, so this takes me straight to the data module activation screen. It kind of bypasses clicking on the library, which I'm not a fan of, but anyways, this is basically where you would activate any books or modules that you were going to load or use. I think for this tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and close this. And I'm going to close the campaign setup. And I'm going to go to the library. And there's something I want you guys to see here is that when you're creating stuff or running a game, I'd probably click all. And over to the right, you'll have all these banners available to you, which will be filled with different things if you activate your books correctly. And I'm going to show you that right now. So if you go to the modules, you will see a bunch of modules that I have installed, probably a million of them, which isn't always a good thing. But I'm going to go ahead and load the unknown whom in here. And that is right here. And this was donated by Rob2e. So if any of you know who Rob2e is, you'll know what I'm talking about. He's donated these products to Fantasy Grounds College. He's made these available for me to give out and teach. The only thing he required of me is that I let you know about him, and maybe afterwards, if you're interested in researching or looking into some of his other products, that would be great. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click load on the module. So if you have that module in your modules directory, this is where you activate it. And this is what you're going to need to follow along in the tutorial. So I went to library, I clicked on all, and then I came to the data module activation screen, and I found this purple guy, which is Rob2e's avatar, and I'm going to hit load on here, and that will load the module. Okay, and as you can see, that's the only thing I have loaded. So technically, if I was going to run this, I would probably want the player's handbook and also the Dungeon Master's Guide. So I'm going to go ahead and load those as well. Now, if you don't own these or you have a whole different system, it would be a very similar ordeal here. But what you want to do is go back to the modules area. And I'm going to search for the PHB Deluxe. Okay, I'm loading that one up. And I'm going to load up the Dungeon Master's Guide as well. Another thing I'd like to tell you guys about is it's not a good idea to load too many things at once. So as you can tell, it's taken that a little while to load. It's one of those things where you have to balance how much material and how much modules you have active, because you will cause your system to crash and it will slow your system down and you'll get a whole bunch of lag. So less is more in Fantasy Grounds. And one more thing I'm going to open is the monster manual. Now, the reason I'm activating these books is I don't really actually need them. However, the module itself pulls from these links from these 3 books that I've activated. And I think that's even some more. And Rob2e has noted that in the module, in the credits. So if you actually open the adventure module from the library and you read some of the story entry, you look at the credits, it actually states this in here. So this is Rob2e's notes to us. It tells you where you can find him, how to become a Patreon, watch his live broadcast, which he's broadcasting now. You can subscribe to his YouTube, so on and so forth. And if you want to find any of his modules and things, they're on that link right there, where it says more from Rob2e at the DM's Guild. So this is where you're going to find his coding effects package, things like that. Another thing is the setup. If you look at the story here, it has a setup. Now he just puts a big note here in bold letters that says, note, races and backgrounds are from the player's handbook, Elemental Evil Supplement, Sword Coast Adventures Guide. He says if you are not using any of these sources for play, adjust accordingly. Also, monsters are, unless noted, they are from the Monsters Manual. So that's just kind of a way to let you know what's happening. And then he actually gives you a list here. And if you noticed, it has all the things listed for races and backgrounds. Kind of a handy little table for you. So is there any questions about what we've covered so far? Okay, so I'm going to move on.
Barrick does have a question.
Sure.
Go ahead, Barrick, and go ahead and ask it. He asked if there is a way to have modules to have them X or checked preload.
There might be actually, and if they're loaded ahead of time, you may be able to send the data to the players, but yes, you can have them loaded ahead of time. I'm not sure if that addressed his question, but nonetheless, you can activate and have these things loaded ahead of time. All right, so in the library here, I have the actual reference guide for the module. And in here, it shows you the elements of a module. So you have encounters, story, images and maps, items, NPCs, tables, parcels, and one other thing that's missing here is quests because there's no quest items in this module. But I will go over all these elements of the module so you guys understand the hierarchy and how they're constructed and put together. So I'm going to go ahead and close this library window, but I just wanted you to see this is where the reference manual is. So if you buy the DM's guide or the monster manual or the player's handbook, this is where you would actually look and read things and look things up. Instead of referring to all these sections of it, you will actually be in the book. So if you go to the actual tables, you will see all those for the Player's Handbook Deluxe. You can go through this material, but the main thing is the reference manual. So if you click the reference manual, this is actually the book. So this would be kind of like you would get if you had the hardback book. As you can see, it's got embedded photos and kind of laid out how the actual hardback is. So anyways, that's where the reference manuals are and also shortcuts to the construction of the modules. Now this isn't set up the same way as a module because it's a reference manual, so it has a lot more tables and different sections. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is get into the actual anatomy of a module. And this is an important thing to do. It is something that you all should know about, and it will help you from getting confused about where and when and why things are set up the way they are. And before I even do that, there's a couple setup things I'm going to do on the desktop. So right now, I don't like this big chat window here. I think it's too big. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on it, clear it, because that drives me nuts with all this text that I don't need to see right now. There's a clear button here. I'm right clicking and hitting the clear button, and that clears the window. I'm going to right click on the desktop and unlock this. And what I'm doing is kind of getting my screen set up. And this is a practice that you should get into when you're using Fantasy Grounds and you're setting up for a game or a session. And even as a player, it'd be very similar. At least I'd hope so. One thing on here that's missing is the dice tower. So in order to use the dice tower and have it active on your screen, there's a couple options that you need to activate. Okay, so I'm going to go up here to the options window. Now it may look a little bit different on your screen, depends on what kind of theme and background you have, but it's this little gear icon up here where it says options. You click on that and you'll get an options list. I don't know why it doesn't stretch out, but you have to scroll up and down to get to some of these menu items. So up above where it says client, you can actually have a manual dice entry mode if you want. So if you're going to incorporate Fantasy Grounds into your tabletop, that's an option you have where you just record the scores. It'll still do the math for you, but you can actually enter a manual dice roll. In the GM section here, to get that pesky little dice tower to come up, you have to enable chat, show GM rolls. That needs to be on. And a lot of people have the misconception that that means you're going to see the Dungeon Master's rolls. Well, it shows the roll, but it doesn't show the results. So you don't need to worry about that. Also, there's a desktop decal. That's where you can switch the background image. Normally, I turn it off. I think they're kind of distracting, but that's just me. The last thing you need to enable for the dice tower is this, where it says Table Dice Tower. You click on and it appears down here in the right corner. I don't know why it defaults there, but it does. And I just right clicked and unlocked it, and I'm going to drag it over next to the dice here so that that is a very comfortable spot. So when I need to do a hidden roll, I just roll it right in a dice tower. This result is only viewable by me and obviously all the rest of you since you're in the stream. So is there any questions about that? Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is basically get into the actual we're going to dissect the modules. So you guys are going to be able to see how exactly they're put together and what they're made up of and what makes up what. All right, so here's the thing. Modules can be set up any way the author sets them up, but there are two different methods or two different approaches that I've noticed over the months that I've learned. And so with that, I'm going to show you how this works. So the first thing that a module normally consists of is a story. Okay, so this is the main section that everything should be tied into, provided that it's a module or a campaign setting. So you have a story mode here, and this is from the banners on the right-hand side. And if you don't see that banner, it's because you need to go to the library and click on all, and then all these banners will show up. So let's pull the story up. And something I want you guys to get comfortable with and familiar with is this group heading here. This is a godsend. This is a way to organize your modules and your stories and everything else that you're working on. So where it says group, right now it's filtered to all. And what that is everything I have opened in the library is going to be displayed here if it has a story entry. Obviously, Rob has this broken up into sections. The main section that I'm going to be looking at today is this Awakening Chapter 2 and the starting area. All this other stuff is reference and background and setup information. So if you're going to run this particular module for anybody, I recommend that you go through that. But for this tutorial, I'm just going to start with Chapter 2. So within doing so, I don't want to see all this other stuff right now. So I'm going to filter it up here where it says group. And if you look, he's got it broken into chapters. So each one of these is a chapter from that module. Sometimes a module is only one story with a bunch of other things linked to it. But in this case, this is a bunch of stories that make up the module. So I'm going to go ahead and click on chapter 2. And there's some areas and things that pertain to that chapter 2. The next thing you may want to look at is the maps. So maps are another way that ties all the story elements together. So I'm going to go ahead and make a little room. And I want you guys to do the same thing if you have this up on your screen. If you do this, you'll kind of get an understanding of how this stuff works. If you need to take a screenshot or whatever, I advise you do so. Take notes, anything that will help you remember this stuff. And then we're also going to archive the video. So if you want to watch it later, I'm going to put it up on our YouTube channel. You could go back, refer to it. If this isn't a good method for you to learn, I will hold one-on-one classes with you. I will try to do a couple smaller one-offs so you can get the hands-on training. But I want to try this so we can capture more people. Another thing to remember is that in the college, we're all volunteers. So if you don't get helped right away, it will happen eventually. So try not to get frustrated or mad. Basically, people are donating their time. They're not really getting paid or anything like that. Okay, so I'm going to get back into this. So the story is the main part. I would say images and maps are kind of tied in with the story. That's probably the second or first most important sections. And same thing, I'm going to filter this out because right now it's showing me everything. These are maps and images combined. I don't want all that. I just want the second part of this module. So again, where it says group, I'm going to filter it. And as you can tell, there's a bunch of entries in here. Well, the only entry I want to see here is the 5e adventure unknown whom. Okay, so this is where all the images and maps are for this particular module. There's the cover, there's a sketch, there's some sections that go, probably handouts for the game. And I'm going to check the awakening area later. I'm going to come back here because that's where I'm going to start to show you guys how this works. So now I have this one filtered to the unknown whom, and this one is filtered to a chapter within the unknown whom. Now my next set of data that I'm going to open here is the NPCs. So let's do that. So the NPCs is typically populated with any monsters or the monster manual or any custom monsters that people or Wizards of the Coast have made. And this shows everything. I really don't want to show everything. So I'm going to filter this one out as well. And I'm going to see if there's anything that's directly pertaining to the story here of Rob's module, the unknown whom. And yes, there is. There's an entry right there. So again, group and then filter. Okay. And now here are all the monsters that he's included in his particular module. So he's got a list here, and they probably draw upon the monster manual. So that's something to keep in mind. So there's the NPCs, and now I'm going to pull up the encounters. Encounters are kind of like NPCs related. So NPCs make up encounters. So right now, I'm going to filter the encounters to the section or the module that I want to look at. Right here, unknown whom, I'm going to use that to filter it out. So I don't get all these other modules that don't belong to this particular game. So this is the thing I want you guys to take away from this, is to start using these groups up here. This is the way you sort your game out. Okay, so now that has filtered to the unknown whom. And now there's another section or another leg to this. And so I'm going to call the story the head. The images and maps is the body. The NPCs and encounters, I guess that would be the right arm. And now I'm going to bring up the left arm. And so I would call the left arm the quests, parcels, and items. Okay, items make up the parcels. Okay, so there's the NPCs, encounters, and now I have items and parcels. So the items make up these parcels. And so I'm going to filter both of those as well. So this says unknown whom. I'm going to filter it to that. Parcel, same thing. I'm going to filter it to this. The 5e adventure unknown whom. Now that narrows these lists down, so there's not a whole bunch of stuff you have to look at. And that's usually what's intimidating or kind of frustrating when you first start DMing is all this stuff is mixed or scattered throughout the group entitled all. But if you actually filter it out, it'll be much easier for you. I'm going to go ahead and open the legs of the module, and then we'll move on from there. So the quest, I guess I'll call that one of the legs. And tables, I'm going to call that one of the other legs. Okay, so you got to think of it this way: the head, the body, the arms, and the shoulders here, and these are the two legs of the adventure. So if you can remember that, just that image alone will help you remember this. And again, I'm going to try to filter these two out. So this one, actually, Rob's module doesn't have any quests, but we're going to look at that later. So I'm just going to leave it there. The tables, I'm going to actually try to see if he created any tables for this game or this module. And yes, he did. It's right here. So there's a random items table, no quests, but then he has all these other elements. So not every module is created the same. Some modules will not have some of these items, some will have more than others. But if you remember this layout here, you won't get as confused when you're running a module. So I'm going to go ahead and pause for probably 5 or 6 seconds just to see if anyone has any questions so far. Okay, so this is the anatomy of a module. Not like I said, not all of them are created the same. This is what you need to look for when you actually purchase a module, or even when you're building a module, to remember that all these pieces make up the story. And like I said, not everything is going to be populated, but if you remember all these sections here, you'll be better off. Okay, let's see. Let's get into this. So the quest items over here. There are no quest items for this module, but I'm going to actually show you how to make your own group. And I'm going to demonstrate that with this quest area since it's not included with the game itself. So I'm going to pull this section up. And what you'll see here is there's all and new. I'm going to go ahead and create a new entry. Okay. I haven't given it a group yet, but I'm going to make a new entry. And it's going to be for this 5e adventure unknown whom. So I'm going to go ahead and entitle that. So I'm going to say edit list. And these little round circles with a line through it, which is actually a pencil, believe it or not, is the edit button. And you'll see a plus button form, and that's how you add the item. Okay. Now, so what I'm going to do now is create my own quest item. And a quest item in Fantasy Grounds is basically role-playing experience points. I do these for my game, so I'm going to create a couple parcels. But I'm going to say, if you guys show up to my table every week, I'm going to give you 50 experience. So I'm going to call this player participation experience. After I'm done, I'm going to lock it. And as you can see, I'm giving characters 50 experience to participate and show up on time. The next thing I'm going to make is another parcel, which is to complete the quest. I'm going to say if everybody completes this quest, they can split 1,000 experience total. So I'm going to create another parcel. This one's going to be more directly related to the module. So I'm going to go ahead and create that parcel. Okay, so I'm going to give them 1,000 XP if they finish the module. So the whole party will be rewarded that, and they'll have to split it. Now you can change that number any way you like, depending on the difficulty and the size of the party and things like that. But for right now, that's what I'm going to make. I haven't locked it, and now I have 2 entries, and they are in the new section. All right, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my own group. And this is important that you know this, or at least know how it works. So I don't want these to be in the new section or even the all section, because that's where you get confused. So I'm actually going to create a new group. And how you do this is you click on this Edit Groups button on the right-hand side. And all that is a matter of clicking on it, and you'll see a plus button. You click the plus button, and it actually makes a new header or a new section of the group called Group 1. That's what it defaults to. So every time you hit that green button, it'll do Group 1, Group 2, Group 3 until you rename it. So I'm gonna name this to the unknown whom. Okay, so that's the unknown whom header that I've just created. So when I'm done, or it's actually like a group header, when I'm done, I'm going to get out of the edit mode. And if you didn't like it or you didn't want to do that, you can actually delete it. But in this case, I'm just going to get out of the edit mode. And now there's a new header. And so what I'm going to do now is drag these events or these quests into that section, just like that. Now, I did not select that. A lot of people try to select it and then drag it in there. It doesn't work that way. You need to click the drop down arrow and scroll to whatever entry you're trying to put this material into and then drag it into there. A lot of people think that you can actually select. So if I select that, it's going to be the wrong spot. It gets kind of confusing when you're first learning how to use these groups, but it's just something you need to get used to and something I want you guys to know. So I'm going to pause for a minute or so and see if we have any questions. Now, hopefully that addressed the dice tower issue. I noticed that we had a question in the chat. It's there, and it's on the left-hand side. And I showed you how to activate it by going into the options. Now, I know that question was probably 10 minutes ago, but you got to remember that I don't see and hear everything. All right, so next I'm going to get into the actual sections of each one of these body parts for the story of Rob Tui's Unknown Whom, Chapter 2. All right, so now I'm going to go to the actual story, which is up on top here. This is the head of it, and I'm going to read this. And it says that it starts the module where the story starts with the unknown villain placing the characters in the bottom of a great dungeon where they have to fight their way from the bottom all the way up to the top level. The characters have no idea why they are there. They only know that they desire to get out of this horrible place. And the goal is to work their way up and out. And so this is the beginning premise of the module itself. And it is always the main story header as well, because this is how he wants to set up the story and also to give you the mood and the feel for this type of situation. So the next section here is the starting area. So I'm clicking on this. And what this is are flavor text and some notes for the DM, and it gives you some data for these particular areas that the party is going to explore. So in this starting section, you're supposed to read this aloud or send it in the chat window. And if you click on these bubbles, it'll actually send this information so that your party can read this stuff. The stuff here on the bottom can be either paraphrased or kept to yourself. And if you notice that there is a link to the map here. So this link here from the Awakening the map is actually this map here. So this is actually linked to this. So when he was creating this module, he probably said, hey, I want the map to come up here. That way the DM can start running the campaign. So the Awakening is here, but it's also here. So I'm going to click this, and this brings up the map with the actual encounter. And so this is the section where most DMs want to run their game. This is how they'll do it. So they bring this map up. This is the first area, the first encounter. So I'm going to go ahead and close the starting area for right now. Actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to actually drag this token down to the toolbar down there. That way I can come back to this and I don't have to keep looking for it. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do the same thing with this map. I'm going to put it down in the shortcut bar. That way, if I accidentally close it, oops, I can bring these things back up. Okay? So when you're running a encounter or a session, you can actually set up shortcuts down here to make your life easier. And I advise that you get used to doing that, because when you set up your game and you're all ready to go, you want to just drag your shortcuts, do a little bit of reading, look at the encounters, and then go. So it's not really too tough or too difficult to do if you do it this way. So any other questions? Okay. All right, so now the next thing I'm going to do is show you how this encounter is set up. So it's made up of a few different elements here. Okay, you have this map, and these maps can be pretty tricky to mess with. They can really become a bother. Fortunately, this map isn't too complicated or big. Right now, I'm just focusing on this area because it's where the party starts. And there's a pin here, which brings us back to the starting area. which is what I had read earlier and showed you guys earlier. So he's dragged this link over onto the map to link it to this section. This is also the, go ahead.
Frost Phoenix is asking how you do the automatic scaling
For which?
for the map.
Automatic scaling. I don't do automatic scaling, but I will show that how that works. Okay, so Rob Tui actually has put the scale here, and he's based that off of probably the size of this door and also the footprint of this particular section. And so he's put the scale here himself, as in the scale in feet. So I'm going to show you guys how the maps work. All right, so I'm going to right click on the map itself, and where the layers are, I'm going to go ahead and click layers, and you'll have some options here. This grid has already been done ahead of time. Rob's already done this for us. So I'm going to actually turn it off so you can see what goes into this. So right now there's no grid. Normally you would be coming at this from the other direction. That's why I turned it off. So let's assume that you purchased a map and it may have grid lines painted on it, but it does not mean that it's gridded in Fantasy Grounds. So the best way to do this is to, you can put a token on there and you'll be able to tell, or you can right click, go to layers, and see if there's a grid that's already set. If it's already set, it would tell you to remove the grid. In this case, I've removed it already. I'm just doing this so I can show you how this works. So you want to set the grid, but before I do that, I want to zoom in. So in order to zoom in, you hold the control key, the left control key, and you roll your mouse wheel forward. The reason I'm doing it this large is so I can see what's happening. If you just try to do it from zoomed way out, it's a lot more difficult. Not saying it can't be done, but it is difficult. Now, if you right click on this map and go back to layers and then set grid, this is where I'm going to set the grid. So for right now, I'm going to do that. Okay, as you can see, here's the scale in feet. I'm getting set up so I can actually draw this grid on here. So I'm going to go to layers, set grid, and if you notice, there's this little square star avatar looking thing. This is how you actually line up the grid with the scale, or you can also go off this doorway, or off the corner of this hallway here. You can use that to scale it. But I think I'm going to try to use Rob's scale here. So I'm going to just center this to where the bottom right quadrant of the star here, or this X, is going to be centered inside of this pixel area. And this is how you set the grid. So I'm going to left click and hold it down and drag it until you can see that this square is being scaled up. And that looks about right. That's 50 per inch. So if you see really carefully, you look at that where it says 50 in that square, that's where you want to be. And now I'm going to let go of the left mouse button. Voila, there's your grid. And now I'm going to zoom back out. So if you don't set the grid, it's going to be difficult for you to put tokens on here, and they will not size correctly. They won't scale properly. So that's why you have to have a grid. The tokens are based off the grid scale. So any questions about that? Okay. So what I'm going to do now is show you a few other features of the map section. So you right click on the map again. This time I'm going to put a mask on top of it. But before I do that, I want to resize it because it's kind of getting out of control here. It's taking up my entire desktop. So I'm going to click resize. And if you look, it'll say small size. And now it's shrunk down to a more manageable size. And I'm going to go ahead and stretch it a little bit so we can see what's happening. And I'm just dragging this bottom right corner. Now, if you want a little bit more control, you can hold down the control key and move it the way you need to. Anyhow, that's how that works. And now I'm going to add a mask on here because I don't necessarily want the party to see the whole hallway yet. So I'm going to stretch this out a little. And you see how it's still got a ways to go? It's kind of taking up the whole section. That would be kind of a burden when you're running the game. So I'm going to go ahead and shrink it some more. So I'm going to hit resize. I'm going to go adjust vertical, which adjusts this thing here on the top to bottom, and right click on it again. Click resize, and now I'm going to adjust the horizontal, which does the width. Okay, so this is the actual size the map is supposed to be. I had it scrunched up so you guys can see what's happening. So you got to get used to sizing the maps and how to utilize the tools for the maps. Okay, so I'm going to actually mask this particular map. It did not come masked because he probably didn't think it was necessary when he created this. But I'm going to go ahead and mask it so you guys can see how that works. All right, so I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to click layers. And you will see a mask over to the right. And that is where you would set your mask. And it will cover the entire map in one fell swoop. Now I am still in the mask mode, which means I can edit and take away sections of the map as needed. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm just going to uncover the section that the party or the group is in. So now it is unmasked. I actually left clicked, drug the cursor down to the section that I wanted to unmask, and it took it a few seconds to respond because my computer is probably trying to catch up with me. But that's how you unmask an area. Now the only stuff that the party members can see is the area that's been unmasked. So I might be nice and unmask the scale. So I went ahead and highlighted that area by the scale and unmasked that for them. That way they can see what the square feet is in the scale. Another thing I may reveal later on is the title. And then I'm going to reveal the compass. All right, so there's the compass. There's the scale. There's the module title. And there's the starting room. And those are the only things I've unmasked so far. Now the advantage to this is that the party won't have any clue, or they won't have much of a clue as to what's going around or what's going on in the map. So I'm going to go ahead and reveal just a little bit more, maybe another 5-10 feet out. And again, I'm just trying to illustrate how the mask works. Now, when I'm done unmasking an area, I actually have to exit the mask mode. So if you see, I've moved the mouse cursor, it now turns back to the eyeball. And I'm also on top of the mask. I'm going to right click and actually get out of the mask mode. And I click on layers. And I can either delete the mask at this time, which I don't want to, or I can exit the mask mode. And that's what I'm doing right now. So now I'm no longer in the mode where I can draw squares to unmask certain areas. Okay, so this is what I've revealed to the party. This is the only thing they've seen so far. I'm going to go ahead and grab a PC that I have created, hopefully, and import it or get one in here. See, obviously I don't have any made up right now, so I'm going to import one. I do that by clicking the edit or add character, but instead of the plus button, I'm going to click this import character. And then I will look for a character. Yeah, there's Ariel. I think we made her last night. Okay. Got to give it a second. It's still thinking. Sometimes Fantasy Grounds can be really fussy, and I have a lot of things going on. So it can take it a minute to actually respond. So you have to be patient. I'm going to try to import another character. There we go. There's a template of a cleric. And I'm going to go ahead and import another character. I'm going to use this monk. Okay. So there's my characters that I'm going to use for the tutorial. I also wanted to show you how to import a character that's already created. And as you can tell down here on the bottom left, it has told me what has been imported. All right, so here's the encounter that I'm going to run or to check out. So the starting area was here, and that brings up the story information. It also gives you the setup notes, the map. It tells you what's in here, what they mean, that sort of thing. It's organized to where you can run this encounter all pretty much from this story entry, which I like. There's some suggestions here. There's some items, things like that. I'm going to actually bring up the encounter, which is in this room. And this room corresponds to Chapter 2, A1, which is this room here. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that up. And this is where you actually start running the actual encounter. So when the party starts here and they've already gone through the setup in the main section, and it triggers some sort of event, then I go to this section in the actual room, and I can either read this aloud or send it to the chat window, or both. So in this case, it says the room immediately starts to fill with water. And if you look on the map over to the right, there's actually water running down this hall. It says it comes from everywhere. It's coming from under the door, and it's coming down all four walls. A loud, booming, disembodied voice shouts, "Run, run forever." And then there's a maniacal laughter. Ha ha ha. So anyways, that's kind of how this room works. And then it tells you to roll initiative, and then it tells you the rate at which the water runs down. So you're kind of in a panic. This creates a sense of urgency. And it tells you that there's a water flow down here, and there's a bunch of rats. And the water is kind of flowing down behind them and forcing them out of their homes. So if you click on this, this is the actual encounter for the room. So A1 room encounter. Okay, so here's the rats. Now, as you can see, there's a check mark next to each one of these rats. That means that they've been pre-placed on this map already. So I'm going to show you how this works. So let's just say the party is up here. I think I'll drag those group members in here when I get a chance. But I'm going to go ahead and send this encounter to the combat tracker. This arrow down here is how you send these rats. They're already placed on the map. You don't see them yet because they're not in the combat tracker. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. It brings up the combat tracker with all the rats listed. And now this combat tracker is set up. So now all these rats that are pre-placed on the map are now in the combat tracker. And there they are on the map. So as soon as they reach the combat tracker, they are now visible. And as you can see, they're already placed. I'm going to go ahead and shrink this down so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to go to small size. Oh, it disappeared. Where'd it go? Well, luckily, I made a shortcut to it, so I don't have to go back. There it is. It even took a shortcut of the size. Okay. So now the rats from the room are populated on the map, but they're also in the combat tracker. Now, one of the things that people commonly do is instead of creating encounters and dragging the monsters to the combat tracker, they will take them straight from here and drop them onto the map. It doesn't work that way. This will not do anything, and it doesn't even scale. Well, maybe it does, but it doesn't work. So I'm going to delete that because that's not how the combat tracker in Fantasy Grounds works. So you have to have them in an encounter, or if you actually take the rat itself, just one rat, and I'm going to go and grab that from the encounter. So if you look at the encounters, they're right here, which is this, A1 and A1. These are what these tie into each other. Now the NPCs are over here. So these NPCs make these encounters. So the NPCs were made into this encounter, and this happens to be a rat. So here's the rat right here. Okay, the rat is already set up. It's got a token. It's ready to go. Okay, so let's just say I didn't like the amount of rats that were in the room. Let's say there wasn't enough. The party was too strong. So I could either just drag one randomly to the combat tracker, in which it added one here, but it didn't necessarily add it to the section here where it would show up for placement. And that's because these are pre-placed. This one is not. This is something I added on the fly. So this particular rat, rat number 9, I'm going to go ahead and bookmark this so I don't lose it. Okay. I'm closing that. I'm closing this encounter and that NPC. And now I'm going to the awakening here. And the rats are already placed except for the one that I put down there. He's not part of the encounter. He's just a random creature that I threw in on top. So all those other rats are over here. They're already placed. So I'm going to go to layers and I'm going to go to resize. And that way I can see it better. Now there's all the rats. Here's number 1 probably and all the way down to number 8. But I need to place number 9. So I'm going to go ahead and drag him to the map. Okay, there's number 9. So now he is considered placed. So when you're actually adding creatures to the combat tracker, you need to put them in the combat tracker first. And when you add them to the map, that's the second step. So add the NPC to the combat tracker, and then from the combat tracker to the map. If you don't do it in that order, it won't work right. So is there any questions about encounter placement? Okay, I'm going to move on. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. It's not getting too confusing. So I'm going to undo all this so that you guys can kind of see how the combat tracker works and how it corresponds to this particular encounter. Now all the rats here are not visible. The party cannot see them according to the combat tracker. So let's just say that rat number 9 had a head start and they saw him scurrying underneath the door in the shadows. So rat number 9, I'm going to click this little eyeball to show NPC, and it'll actually show it a little bit darker, and the party can actually detect that rat outside the door. The rest of them are still hidden because they're out of view. If you wanted to show all the rats now, you would have to first unmask this section, which doesn't really matter, but it kind of does. But if you wanted to actually be more realistic, you would unshade the area first and then reveal the rats, or you can go vice versa. In this case, I'm just going to do it vice versa. I'm going to reveal all the rats at once, and that's this button up here. That actually hid the rats because the last command I did was to reveal it. And then I'm going to click it again, and now all of the rats should be revealed. Okay, and see what it did is it only revealed this one because I had messed with this particular rat and added it after the fact. So that's why it did not reveal it correctly. So now I have to manually undo all these. Okay, now they're all revealed. So you can see the eyeball is showing. Okay. So I'm going to undo this encounter. And by undoing, I'm going to remove them from the combat tracker. So I'm going to go to menu, hit this delete from tracker, and you can either delete all non-friendlies or everything, like the foes and the characters. But in this case, I'm going to do all foes. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and show you how to build the encounter your own way. I'm going to go back to this encounter that I had down here on the shift key here, the awakening. And here's the room. Okay, there's the encounter again. The rats are still placed. There's still a bunch of rats. They're still on the map, but they're not revealed yet because they're not in the combat tracker. So now I'm going to unplace them. Okay, the encounter still exists, and I can still send them to the combat tracker, but they are not pre-placed anymore on the map. So I will just pretend that this encounter was a one-off and I wasn't prepared and I just made it real quick. So now what I'm going to do is place them in the combat tracker first instead of placing them on the map. Okay, now they're all on the map, but they're not necessarily placed. So they need to be placed now, even though they're in the combat tracker. And so there's two ways to place these. You can either place them individually right now from this encounter, which would check these off as you place them, or you can place them all from the actual combat tracker. So where it has this hostile button here, this helmet, I guess, in some cases it'll be a skull, depends on your interface. You drag this over to the map, and it will actually place all of them at once instead of doing it one at a time. Okay, now they're all placed. They're not in the spot you want them, but at least they're on there. And at this point, you move them around. But you have to make sure they're visible first. Now you can move them. The tokens are locked until they're visible. So anyways, you get the point that you can actually do your own encounters. You can place them how you like. I just did this to show you how this works. Any questions on the encounter with the rats? Okay. I'm hoping you guys are following along. Even if you're not able to, you can do this later and go back, and I'm going to actually have the video uploaded to YouTube. All right. So one more thing about this encounter that I want you guys to see and how encounters are built. So I'm going to go ahead and close this for right now. I have it shortcutted down here so I can come back to it. But I'm going to go ahead and delete the combat tracker first. So hit menu, and I'm going to delete everything off the combat tracker. Okay. And now they are no longer placed because they are not on the combat tracker. Okay. And now I'm going to actually change this quantity here to 10 rats because I think I need more. So this is actually locked. In order to edit that, I have to unlock it. Now, if you buy stuff from Wizards of the Coast, you may not be able to unlock it, in which you'll have to create your own or come up with something else. Okay, I'm going to change this to 10 now. And I don't know if you could tell, but it changed it to 10 instead of 8. So now I have 10 tokens to place. Another thing I want to do is refresh. So what I'm going to do here is refresh this CR rating. Because I added the rats, it's going to change a little bit. Didn't change the CR this time, but the experience might change.
Crody had a question in chat, Lohan.
Okay,
He says on my combat tracker there's a 0.4 near the token. What does that mean?
that is the scale of the token. Okay, so I added the rats, and instead of there being 8, now there's 10. I think I'm going to change it again to like 12. And now there's 12. I hit the CR rating, now it changes to 1, and then the XP is now 120 instead. So I'm going to go ahead and lock it. That encounter is ready to be placed. So I'm going to place these on that encounter map the way I want to, instead of the way it was given to me. So I'm going to go ahead and open up that encounter again, or the map, I should say. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and place these. And as I place them, it checks it off, so it tells you when they're being placed. Now, don't get confused. This is just a main token of the encounter itself. This is not a token to put on the map. So this is setting up a pre-placed encounter. The other ones I was showing you was just how the anatomy of it works and also how to add your own on the fly. Okay. So as you can see, I'm placing all the rats. Kind of tedious, but this is the way you do it. So this would be good for like an ambush, whatnot. So go ahead and play around with that when you get free time and get used to learning how to place these things and setting up your encounters accordingly. So I'm going to go ahead and close this for now. Now the rats are gone because they're placed, but they're not on the combat tracker. So I'm going to pull up the combat tracker. As you can see, it is empty. I'm going to go ahead and bring that encounter back up. And it is called the room. There they are. Now I'm going to send them over. And there they are. And now they're also visible on your map. They're not visible to the party, but just visible to the map. In order to make them visible, I'm going to click the eyeball up here to make them all visible. And there we go. There's all the rats are visible to me so that I can move them around. Because until they're visible, you will not be able to move them around. Once they're placed, then you can go ahead and change the visibility again. And now, no one can see them except for you. The reason I think they did this was so that you can put the element of surprise. So if you dropped an encounter on the fly, it would not automatically make them visible until you said so. So any questions on that? Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next section. I'm going to close this map for now. Especially I have it already shortcutted down here, so I don't need to keep it up. I'm going to close this encounter, which is down here also. But before I close it, I'm going to fix it to where it was before. So I'm going to unlock it, unplace them, and I'm going to change it to 8. Okay, I'm going to refresh the CR rating, which goes back to a half, and the XP went back to 80. I'm going to lock it, and there we go. Now, the only thing that didn't really clean up very well is the rats after the number of 8. So I'm going to right-click, delete that rat. I'm going to delete rat 9, number 11, and number 12.
There is another question in chat, Laroon.
Okay.
Frost Phoenix says, once in the combat tracker, are the monsters visible to the players or only when you make them visible?
Initially, it's only when you make them visible. So when you drag them over, they default to invisible. And you can either make them all visible at once, or you can turn them on one at a time. And so that's strictly your preference on how you're going to run the encounter. The only time you might turn them invisible again is if they use an invisibility spell. In which case the party might know where that creature was once it turned invisible. However, if you turn the visibility off in the combat tracker, only you as the dungeon master will see where they're actually at. In which case, anyone trying to attack that creature would have disadvantage and whatever penalties it incurs. So that would probably be an exception to this, but for the most part, the creatures are automatically added to the combat tracker as invisible. So any other questions about encounters? The reason I chose this topic because it seems to be one of the most confusing aspects of starting off in Fantasy Grounds. It's one of the mistakes that I made, and I still make it occasionally, where you drag a NPC right to the map, and that doesn't work. It has to go to the combat tracker first and then to the map. Or it has to be turned into an encounter and then sent to the combat tracker and then sent to the map. So the main thing is that they have to touch that combat tracker in order for them to parse correctly and to function mechanically within Fantasy Grounds. If you guys got any questions, I'm going to take a 5-minute or less. If you guys need to go to the bathroom, go smoke a cigarette, get some water, whatever, I'm going to take 3 to 5 minutes. I will be right back. There any more questions before we get back into this? All right. All right, I'm going to get back into this. I took a short break, got some water, went to the restroom. Okay. So we're not completely done with that encounter, but I wanted to just show you how encounters are set up. So basically, this encounter was pre-created by Rob when he created this module. You click on that, there's the encounter, there you go. So I want to add my own encounter here because I wanted something different and not the rats. This time I think I want to add like a goblin or something. So I'm going to go ahead and create my own encounter and add it to this. So right now, I'm just looking off the list that he's provided here from the NPCs. Fortunately, he already has a goblin. I'm going to go ahead and use this, but if I wanted to, I can use it from the monster manual or whatever source I have. You know what? I think that to make this easier, I'm going to just stick with Rob's list here. And instead of a goblin, I think I'm going to add some bats. So when the water comes rushing down, I think a couple bats are going to come flying out too. And so I'm going to click the bat here, and here's the monster entry. Now it has no token here, and that may be because it was drug or taken from the monster manual. And so at this point, you could unlock this creature because it's not locked. It looks like this is a copy. If it was not a copy, this area would be red, in which you could not unlock it. So I want to show you how that works. So before we build the encounter, I want to show you how to use what you already have before you run a game. So let's go to the good old monster manual. Okay, big list of creatures, Wizards of the Coast issue. Okay, so I'm going to build a small encounter with some bats. And I think what's going to happen here is I need to show you guys how to create your own encounters and how to make copies of them so that you can utilize them in your own games. So here's the bat here, but if you wanted to, you could search for it. But I'm going to go ahead and grab this bat. Now this bat here is different than the one that Rob had put in his game. Probably the same bat, but just different instances of it. So his bats are, let's see, they're back in the module in the NPC section. If I filter it back, I'm going to go back to the bat that he created. But in this case, I'm going to actually make my own copy of it. So what you do is you find the creature that you want to edit. Right now, I cannot edit it. It's read only. Damn it, it's stuck. I can't do anything with it. Okay, all you have to do is actually drag it back into the list. It'll reshuffle here. I'm going to close that one, and I'm actually going to look for bat. Okay, there's a few different entries there, but the bat that I just created is this one here that's not linked to a book. Okay, this is the copy. Copy, original. So the original I cannot mess with. The copy I can. So you can unlock it. And now I'm going to filter this back to Rob 2e's module. Okay, here's the bat. So now here's a whole nother copy of the bat. You see, it's pretty much the same thing. I think he made a copy of it. What happens though, when you make copies and you don't own the copy or it's not linked, you don't get the artwork to go with it. And so I'm going to go ahead and change this out because I don't like the fact that there's no token. So I'm going to go ahead and close. I'm going to lock this and close it. And this B here doesn't look very attractive. And I'm going to rename this so I don't get confused. We call this Batty the Bat, I guess. And I'm going to say Batty the Bat was actually a polymorphed individual. So with that in mind, most bats here, they're statted as 2 for intelligence. I can say Batty still has all of his intelligence. And he has wisdom, obviously, because that's pretty good. And here's all his abilities and attacks and things like that. So a lot of the stuff can be changed. I'm not going to go through tutorial on how to create these from scratch. That will be for another class, but you can do some minor edits here. I think I'm going to give Batty the Bat 2 hit points instead of 1. And I'm going to go to tokens, which you guys should learn about what these are. The tokens are down here next to the library. And if you go to your tokens folder, you will probably have a few things here from some of the books that you're picking up along the way. All these, a lot of these are custom ones I made myself. I have a folder called custom tokens. And there's a few that I made, not what I'm looking for. I'm going to go to the modules section here. All right, so when you buy Wizards of the Coast and all those other, third-party add-ons, this is where all the tokens are. You can activate them from here. I'm going to go ahead and load the animal tokens, which is right here. This comes with the standard license, I believe, and they are generic tokens. I'm also going to activate some tokens for the players that I selected earlier. I'm going to do a search because I have too many. Okay, so here's the character tokens. So there's pogs and there's tokens. So the pogs are just the round image, and the tokens are actually either top down or more of a refined image. So I'm going to click that, and that will enable another bag for me to select from. Now, word of caution is you do not want to open up all these tokens. You're going to make yourself a problem. You're going to run out of memory. So just keep this to a minimum. You don't want to unlock all these. If I sat here and loaded all these, eventually this thing would crash pretty hard. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. And when you're using a token bag and you select your tokens, if you close that module, you're not going to lose the token. So once you've selected your tokens, close the bags by deactivating the module. Okay, here's the animal tokens. If I click on that, I get an array of creatures. And of course I don't have a bat. What do you know? So I'm just going to use one of these winged creatures. I'm going to use this duck, even though it doesn't really say bat, just as an example. Okay. And all I did was replace that generic letter B with one of the tokens. And now I'm going to lock it, and it's ready to go. However, this particular bat that I created is not a part of this module. It is now an NPC that's probably defaulted to new. Nope. Where did it go? It's not part of that. So now I'm going to do a search for all. So I'm going to go back to all. And now I'm going to look for bat. Okay. Batty the Bat's right there, and it's actually created in the monster manual. That's not where I wanted to create it. Not a big deal, but still, I didn't want to add it to that. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this down. And you can see the adventure, the unknown whom, I'm going to add it to that. Okay. And now Batty the Bat is no longer part of the monster manual. Okay. All right, so I'm going to filter this back to the unknown whom. And there's the bat and Batty the Bat. Okay, so Batty the Bat is part of this campaign, but it's not part of the module. And as you can see, he does not have a little book next to it. Unless I save this and re-export it with the changes that I've made, this is not a permanent fixture. This is only per campaign. This does not change the actual module itself. It only changed the state of the module at this time and at this place. So if I was to reload this module, this Batty the Bat would no longer be here. And if I made a whole new encounter or a whole new setting, I should say a campaign folder, that Batty the Bat would not be associated here. So if there's any questions about that, please ask. So this is a typical place that people go to when they need new encounters or monsters. You can make your own variations of the generic monsters. It's just that it's a good idea to get in the habit of kind of creating your own monster manual. And what I'm saying is to do your own. So I would create my own entry. I'd click new, and I would actually create a new section so that when you make copies of the originals, they'll go in there and you can keep track of the ones that you've made and the ones that come with the modules or the ones that are in the Dungeon Master's Guide or the Monster Manual. So by doing that, I would say to add a new group, and I would hit the plus button. It defaults as group 1. I'm just going to call it My Monsters for right now, for lack of a better title. Go ahead and click on Stop Editing Groups. And now I have my own group of monsters. Nothing in it yet, but my own group. Now I'm going to take Batty the Bat actually and put him in here. So where was he? He's in the Unknown Whom. So I'm clicking that, and there he is right here. Now I don't want to add him to this section, but I do definitely want to add him to my own bestiary. So I'm going to go ahead and drag Batty the Bat into my monsters. And now this will be a running list of any creatures that I edit for myself and for my games. Now I could leave them in the Unknown Whom adventure while I'm running it, but technically I don't want them in there because that kind of contaminates the module in this campaign. So I'm going to leave Batty the Bat here outside of the module. And anytime I edit any other modules in this campaign, I put it in my own little section. And this is just more or less an organizational skill.
All right, Laroon, there is a question from the chat here. Is there a tutorial or can there be a class explaining how to add tokens to Fantasy Grounds? I can add portraits, but not tokens, and I'm having a hard time figuring out how to add tokens.
Yes. The answer is yes. I can make a tutorial to show you how to make tokens, and there is a difference. Portraits will end up becoming tokens in a character sheet situation. When you're making creatures, though, you have to have a token. And so portraits and tokens are two separate things, especially on a character sheet. In the case of a NPC that's a monster or some kind of encounter, you can make tokens on your own, and you would put them in a token section in your folder of Fantasy Grounds. There's a subsection where you actually put those so they're available. But you have to keep in mind that they should be a certain size, and there's all different places where you can collect them, and you can also make them. You can get top-down ones, you can get ones that are kind of facing you with first or third-party perspective. It just depends on what you're looking for. But yes, there's a way to do it. It's not that hard, and the next class we will be doing that. So the next time I run this class, we're going to be getting more into the customized sections of making your own stuff.
All right. And there's another question from Frost Phoenix again. Can you add a monster to more than one group?
I think so, and honestly, I don't know that for sure, but I think it would be a copy of the same creature. That's what I think. So I believe I'd have to take Batty the Bat here and make 3 or 4 different instances of the same creature and put them in each group.
All right, sweet. Both of them said thank you.
Okay. Now I'm going to move on to the next part of the lesson. Okay, so that takes care of the NPCs, and now we're going to make our own encounter. So rather than taint this particular encounter for Rob Tui's module, I'm going to create my own. So I'm going to click on New. I'm going to click on a new encounter, which I'm going to create one now. And it's blank. There's nothing there. Okay, good old Batty the Bat again. Batty the Bat rises again. That's what I'm going to call this. Okay, so Batty the Bat is a creature from the NPC, and he's in my monsters. I'm going to drag Batty the Bat, the actual creature, into the encounter. Okay, there's Batty the Bat with the token. I'm going to go ahead and close this encounter, but before I do, I'm going to filter it back to the unknown whom. That way it's organized. I'm going to shrink it a little bit because I don't want to break this scenario here. And there's Batty the Bat. Now, let's just say Batty has some brothers. Okay, now there's 5 Batty the Bats. And I haven't calculated anything here, and Fantasy Grounds does that on its own. So he's based off the original bat, but he has a little bit more intelligence. And so he has the CR rating and the 50 experience based on the number of bats. Another thing I can set here is the faction, whether it's friendly or not. So faction means nothing right now, it's just a neutral. If you click friendly, it'll be green, which would be like allies or creatures that wouldn't necessarily attack the party. It can be neutrals, which kind of makes sense for Batty the Bat, or they can become hostile. So those are 3 different states of the creatures as far as reactions. So Batty the Bat is now Batty the Bats. Rise again. And I'm going to lock it. And there's the encounter. Now, if Batty the Bat was an actually polymorphed individual that was trying to warn the party about something that's going on in the dungeon that they're in, I'm going to make a quest item that would tie this together. So do you remember the quest down here? If the party discovers Batty the Bat's true identity, then they will get a quest reward for that. So I'm going to make one real quick. I'm going to call it Batty the Bat discovered or something like that. Call it Batty's Redemption. I'm going to give the party 200 for figuring out that he's not a stupid bat. I'm even going to put like a DC level in there so that it leaves me a note so I know what they'd have to do on perception. Just as a note to myself kind of thing. If someone rolls above a 20 and they're actually paying attention to Batty the Bat, then they'll get this quest reward. So go ahead and lock that. And now I have another quest item that I've added. Now this is totally above and beyond the module itself. This is stuff that I'm adding to my module here, or to the one that Rob made. So now Batty the Bat, the encounter is there. Now if I wanted to, I could either place these on that map that we had earlier, along with the rats. They're already placed, so I don't have to worry about those. There we go. And now I can put them on the map individually, which are actually ducks. I can make this real silly where Batty the Bat is actually a duck that thinks it's a bat. Anyway, so there they are on the map. They are not placed yet on the combat tracker, but they are placed on the map. So I'm going to go ahead and place them. As you notice, they don't have the green dot. Okay, now they're placed. Now they have the green dot. That's a status. So now you got this whole combat tracker lit up with things to fight or to interact with. So now Batty the Bat is placed. It's on the map. When the party comes to the door, they got crazy ducks that think they're bats, and they got the rats. So that's that. Okay. Any questions about Batty the Bat? That's actually a duck that thinks it's a bat. Okay, moving on. I'm going to close this map once again. I'm going to actually clean up this combat tracker because it's really messy. So I'm going to hit menu, delete from tracker, everything. Delete all non-friendly, which is all the red skulls here. And then there's delete only foes. I think that would be anything that you're fighting or combating at the time. There we go. Empty combat tracker, because nothing's happened yet. I just wanted to show you guys how that works. So technically in the game, nothing has occurred. Not yet. Okay, so here we talked about encounters. We talked about quests a little bit, which was there. I think I got rid of NPCs. There we go. So we got story, encounters, NPCs, and quests. Okay. Talked about maps a little bit. Not a whole lot to talk about other than the fact that there's maps in here and images. So it says images and maps. So this way is underneath a group heading, which I like. It's fine. It's all under one group. It's easy to find. There's not that many. If you find yourself creating a bunch of images and maps and you need to organize them a little bit better than doing this, there's a way to name these things so that it's more organized. And I'll show you what I do to make this a little bit easier on you. So this awakening map is this map here. There's another map. Another map. This is a player's map. So one was a DM's map, one was a player. There's an eyeball, which is not a map. Final battle, which is blank, not sure why, but I think it's just an area to fight in. There's a message, which is not a map. A note. A sketch. and the cover of the module. So until I went through each one of these, I had no idea what these were. I haven't looked and read this entire module yet. I probably should, but I've only read the first part of it, up to chapter 2. But anyways, that's as far as I would get actually with this tutorial. But for right now, I would like to rename these because I don't like the way they're named. That's just my personal preference. You don't have to do this. So where it says the awakening, cool, I'm good with that. I realize what this is, but for organizational sake, I'm going to change this around a bit. So I went ahead and unlocked it, and now I'm going to rename it. I'll still leave the number 1 there, but I'm going to put the word map in front of it. Okay, now it's map, comma, the awakening. And that's going to change these down here on this list. Now, this is another map, but this is a DM's map. It says the expanse within DM. I'm going to say map, comma, 2, kind of change it up a little bit so it's easier for me to understand what this is. There we go. Locked it, renamed it to map, comma, 2, the expanse within DM's map. Okay. And as you can see, it's starting to change this order down here. This is the player's map. Same thing. Kind of change it up a little bit for myself. Now, the only reason I'm doing this is to make it easier on me later on. So I guess you could say this is kind of like prep. And I think there was one more map, and it was the final battle. That one. It's just a big, huge grid. And it tells you the finality of it. Okay? That must be the very end. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to a map or grid or something. Map, final battle. In parentheses, I'm going to put the end. All right, so now I've changed those to where now it says map, 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 map. Now what I would do with the rest of these is change these other descriptions. So, oh, there's another map. Didn't see that. Okay, so that's another map and another. Okay, so I got all the maps organized, and now I'm going to do the images. I'm going to do a similar thing. There's the eyeball. Handout, big green eye. Handout message. Now, this is something that happens in the beginning of the story. So I'd probably put like a 1 or something here. That'll let me know that that kind of goes with the first room. Okay. And you can name it however you want, but the point I'm trying to make is that I've got it organized now in the list. Here's a note that you get at some point. Okay, so I've renamed all those, got a sketch now. There we go. And now I'm just going to name this as artwork. Okay, so I have artwork, which is just like the covers and the things that make the module look nice or that you want to present in the beginning or the end. The handouts are all the things that you give out during the game for visual, and then all the maps are organized. So now you have a list or hierarchy of the images. So when you're hunting around on the list, it's not such a difficult thing. Now this module was pretty small. There was just a dozen things here. And another thing you notice is there's a little pencil next to the book. And since I've edited those entries, it looks like I've edited the book. If you see these other entries over here, they have not been edited. Well, this one has, the bat. And so it keeps track of what's been edited and what hasn't. But the main thing I wanted to show you here is that all these are now organized according to what type of image they are, instead of just naming them and leaving them in this list. So any questions on that? This is more or less an organizational skill. This is not necessary. You don't have to do this, but it's something I show my students. And this would kind of hold true with some of these other sections. Like if I was going to make my own weapons, I would probably categorize them, put them in their own section, so on and so forth. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is I want to look at parcels and items. Okay, items make up parcels. Okay, parcels are a combination of either coins or items or one or the other. So this is a parcel that's given out. And it looks like 8 potions of healing. Another point in the game, you got a map and some other healing potions. So on and so forth. Okay, so what I want you guys to know is that you can make your own tables, your own parcels, your own items. Everything can be customized. But I want to show you how the items make up the parcels. So let's say Rob's got all this treasure here, and I want to give the party some coins because I don't see a whole lot of coins. Really no coins, okay? Boo. So I'm going to make my own parcel.
Before you start doing that, Laroon, there's a couple of questions here. Crody asks, what is the small red pen on the top of each map and image?
Can you repeat the question? What is a small pin above what?
What is the small red pen on top of each map and image?
Oh, okay. Now we'll go back to one of those maps.
And then Frost Phoenix asks, when you rename these maps and images, are the tags on the maps and other areas updated as well? Or do you have to go back and relink tags?
I believe you have to relink the tags. Um, they are basically per campaign. So once you do this, it's not a permanent thing unless you resave this whole campaign as a new module or as another instance of it. Hopefully that answers that question. The other thing about the red pins is I believe that these are just links to the rooms or the story entries.
Actually, he meant the top right, the little red image over here to the right hand side of the map.
Honestly, I never knew what that was.
I think what it is just an icon to let you know there are pins on that map. I believe that's what it is.
Yeah, I believe so too. I've never messed with them. They're just there. You can't click on them or do anything with them, so I've never messed with them.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. It points out that there's pins and it's searchable or something like that because there's a magnifying glass and a pin there. And it may be a status indicator.
Yeah. And he says thank you.
Okay, you're
Um,
welcome.
Frost Phoenix had are pins visible to players?
Okay, let's get into that. The question was, are pins visible to players? In this case, no, because I did not share the pins. So if I went back to that map again, which I bookmarked, I'll go down here where it says the room, wrong one, the awakening. Okay, these pins are only for me, but if you right click on it, you can actually make it shareable. In this case, no, I would not make those shareable because it has the information that only I need. I don't want them to see it. The only time that may be a thing is if it's an image that I wanted to link here and show them after the aftermath of a battle. Then I would right click, share it, it would show a photo. So it depends on the situation that you're in, but I would not share those pins unless it was an image that I wanted to link here that had some sort of aftermath or outcome of the encounter. Whether it be a discovery, a gruesome scene, whatever. It could be pinned here for easier use so you don't have to dig around in the image and map section. Another thing is to share this map in the state that it is with the party. You need to right click on the pin itself and click share sheet, in which this will be shared with the whole party now. So if you're running this encounter, this section here that I've unmasked is going to be revealed, and this whole mask will be still there. But this area that's unmasked, the party will see that. They'll see this dimension here, unfortunately, but they will not see anything on it. So they'll know it's bigger than this section, but they'll know by how much because of the size of the scale of the window. So it's kind of a giveaway that it's a big area, and sometimes it isn't. However, that's just how the Fantasy Grounds is set up, so there's not much we can do about that. But this is how you share it. Now, there's a thing you need to know about managing your game. So when let's say we finish this area, they get the loot, they move on. If we don't need to come back to this area for any reason other than to come back through, I would unshare the map. And how you unshare is by going back to the maps list. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to go back to the images and maps, and now it has this little P here that says public. So now that says that it's been shared with the party. I want to unpublic it or unpublicize it. So if I click on that little P there, it is no longer a shared image. They can no longer access it. And the reason to do that is to keep your memory usage down. Until they upgrade Fantasy Grounds, you're going to have to manage your inventory or manage your books and your tokens and the images that you're sharing. So that is how you unshare something. And so if you see a little P next to it in any one of these categories, so it can be in story or parcels or anything, you can unshare them at that point. And that frees up resources and memory. So that's something very critical that you should keep in mind. Now, if you're running a short little one-off and you don't have a bunch of stuff open, you're probably fine. But if you got a big campaign and it's ongoing, as you go or when you're done with that encounter, you need to unclick those and unshare them. Now, if you put them in the shortcut link, but you unshare them, you'll still be visible to you, but they will not have access to it at the player's side. So hopefully that explains that a little bit. Okay, so we covered encounters, NPCs, quests. Now we're going to go to the parcels and the items. So I'm going to make my own parcel, but it's made up of items. So I think in this parcel it's mostly going to be coins, but I'm going to go ahead and find a pouch. Well, I was searching in the wrong area because I was searching just in the module. So in order to do a proper search, I would have to go to all or select the book. I think in this case I'll just do the Dungeon Master's Guide. Nope, no pouch. Player's Handbook. And instead of trying to figure that out, I'm just going to click all. There we go. It is in the player's handbook. All right, so I'm going to use a pouch along with some coins to make my parcel. So this is going to be a pouch that old Batty the Bat used to own when he was in his humanoid form. Now, we don't know what he was. I imagine he's probably a goblin or something. But he thinks he's a bat, but he's actually a duck because he doesn't know any better. Okay, so I'm going to create his treasure parcel that he had with him before he was polymorphed. So I'm going to go ahead and create a parcel. Okay. I'm going to use it in this adventure, but for the sake of this, without contaminating it, I'm just going to make a new entry. Okay, I clicked that, got a new entry here. I'm going to call this add-on parcel or something. Actually, Batty's parcel. This is Batty's stuff. So this would actually give the party a clue as to maybe there was someone else in this dungeon at one time. And so if they came across his stuff, they may have a better chance to figure out that Batty was once a humanoid. So let's give this section here some items. So let's say Batty was, initially he was a goblin. So I give him 1 gold. 1 gold, 3 silver, and some copper pieces. And then I'm going to grab the pouch, bring that over, because that's what he had with him. I think I'm going to give him some leather armor, maybe. Okay, gave him some leather. And I'm going to give him a club or something. Okay, here's the club. All right. So there's my parcel that I created from scratch. I pulled those out of the other sources I had. Now I'm going to filter this back to the unknown whom because I don't need that stuff anymore. Going to get rid of this club search. And there's all the items that Rob put in there originally. Looks like there's quite a bit of treasure in there, actually. All right, so here's the parcel. This is a parcel. It's made up of either coins or items or one or the other or both. So that's just so you know what this is. Now this would link to the actual item section that it came from. And you can also add or take away coins accordingly depending on what you want to do. I'll just say maybe he had a few more silver. Okay, he had 5 silver instead. I'm going to go ahead and lock this. This is Batty's stuff. Now, being that Batty has his own treasure parcel, and I kind of have my own encounter, I'm just going to make my own entry here. So I'm going to click the edit button. I'm going to click plus, new group. I'm just going to call this my stuff or my parcel's Batty so I remember what it was. And now I'm going to drag Batty right into that section, get out of the edit mode. And there we go. Here's Batty's stuff. Now, Batty's stuff is separate from Rob 2E stuff. So I think the question was earlier if I could drag this in multiple groups. Well, I don't think I can, but what I can do is re-drag it back in. Now I have 2 copies. So now I'm going to drag Batty's stuff into the unknown whom. Let me see if that worked. Yep, Batty's stuff exists here. Okay. And obviously it's not part of the module yet because it's not saved. But now Batty's stuff exists in the module and in my own section. Avatar, I don't want you to connect to this, please. If I can get one of the moderators to message Avatar, he's connected to the table. It's okay. I know you're eager. Okay. So next thing we're going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and filter it back to the unknown whom. So now we made our own parcel called Batty's Stuff. Here's the stuff. Okay. I'm going to close this. There we go. So the answer is to make another copy if you want it to exist in a different group. It's fairly easy once you make it once. You can do any number of copies that you need for each group. Is there any other questions? Okay. Now what we're going to do is get into the story again to kind of tie this all together. Okay, so we had items and parcels. Those are done. I'm going to close those. Encounters are done. But actually, I want to make sure that Batty Rises is in this encounter. So I made another copy. It's going in there in the encounter section. And I'm going to close it. NPCs we're done with. Quests we're done with. Images and maps, pretty much done with. And that's all we got left. So the story pretty much ties all those elements together. The one thing we didn't cover is tables, which are one of my favorites. So Rob 2e has created a random table, and I imagine it's part of the story. And what he's done is created a table that will roll out to the chat area. So when I click on this, it's going to roll randomly into the chat box. And if you look down at the results down there, let me close the combat tracker for a second. You will see where Avatar had tried to connect. Sorry about that. And also where the dagger has dropped from here into this window. And so the reason he did that probably is so all he has to do is drag this item to a character. So let's do that. I'm going to bring up the PCs, the combat tracker once again. And this time I'm going to actually clear this stuff later. I'll show you that in a bit. I'm going to go ahead and click the PC section, which I've done, and the combat tracker. Okay, I'm going to actually find pictures for these two characters. All right, so here's where we were talking about tokens earlier. So this spot is for tokens. This spot is for your portrait. So this is a cleric. I'll use this dwarven cleric picture. Okay, and what happens is this portrait is now the default token. So when I put it on the map, it's going to show this. And most people are good with the portrait as a token because sometimes when you use tokens themselves, they're hard to see on the battle map. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. Let me get the druid or the other monk going. Here's the monk. And I just click on the portrait to bring up my menu, and these are in your subfolders in Fantasy Grounds. These ones I happen to make myself. So there's my monk template. Okay. And these templates are actually something that we distribute here. Genghis Tebow made these, and I'm just using these as examples. But these also have all the nice coatings on them that he likes to make himself, which is really cool. All right. So anyways, so this character here is a monk and a cleric. Now I have tokens for each one of those. So now that that's happened, now I'm going to drag those to the combat tracker. Okay, there's that. And there's that. So there's your two characters. Now you notice I didn't put those on the map. I put them on the combat tracker first. Now the next step I would do is take these same characters and put them on the party tracker. And that is a DM's best friend. So let's look at the party tracker. And it looks like this little group or a group of figures here. So there's the party tracker or the party sheet. Okay. And now I'm going to drag these two characters onto the party tracker or the party sheet. There's one. There's two. Now we'll come back to the party sheet when we get a little further along, but that is a step that you need to do once you've added characters to your group. So I would add them to the combat tracker and to the party sheet in the beginning of your game. And we still have the results down here from the dagger. So on this particular table, Rob had chose to send this out to the chat area, and only he can see it. It's got the question mark, so it's only the dungeon master sees what it is. Now, what I could do is on one of these character sheets, I could open to the inventory, drag that +1 dagger right to the inventory. Okay, that's one way to do it. If you change the output to parcel, it would be more of a permanent type thing in which you would roll. Parcel pops up. You can change the title. We can just say it's awarded treasure or whatever, and then drag this to another section. We can either make this part of the story, in other words. So this would be more for on the fly, you know, here you go, you won this result here. Also, tables can be outputted for different things, but there are 4 output options, and there's visibility options. So he has this die roll hidden. So if he unclicked that and roll again, this would not only create a parcel, but it would now be visible to the group, and they could see what the parcel is. So if you clicked on that, that actually brings the parcel up. The party can actually see that too. So you can change the visibility on the random rolls. These are made up of items. Now, tables can be made up of a lot of different things. They're pretty interesting. So right now, this is set as parcel. It was originally set as as a chat. Okay, if this was different items, I would probably handle it differently. So if these were story items, like random story elements or rumors, I could make them chat, or I can turn those into a story. If they were more treasure items, like kind of what they are now, you can change them to parcels. If they were creatures that were linked here, then you can change it to an encounter output. If it was a creature that you wanted them to meet, like just a bunch of NPCs, then you can also change that output to chat and then roll, and then whatever NPC popped up here would be who the characters meet. So there's different ways to handle the encounters and different ways to build them. And I'm just going to build a really quick encounter table so that if the party wanders off track, I have something that I can use. All right, so now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a monster table, nothing fancy. And these tables can get real fancy. You can actually have a table that calls upon another table that calls upon another table. So you can have tables upon tables rolling upon each other. There's a way to do it, but I'm not going to get into that deep in this tutorial today. So anyways, and I think there's better people out there to teach that actually. I just like them kind of simple, maybe 1 or 2 steps. There's people out there like our friend Pro Novus that has created entire tables where you click it once and it rolls like 50,000 tables. I don't have the time to program that, but that's a really cool feature. All right, so anyways, and I make my own table. So these are the results from the tables that I had. You can delete them if you're not going to use them when you're done. He has one table here. It's been edited, and that's because I changed this here. I'm going to close the monk for right now. And here we go. I'm going to make the table. So like I said before, tables are made of different things. In this case, this is going to be an encounter table. So I'm going to create my own table. Now you have a chance to do add table by size, or you can just create a generic one and add as you go. If you add by size, you can change how many rows or how many rows that you want to change it to. I think I'm just going to go with 4 rows. And then how many columns? 1. Okay. There we go. There's our basic table. I'm going to call this Wandering Monster Table. Okay, if the party gets off track. Okay, so I wouldn't necessarily want to put this output as chat. This is going to be an encounter. So I'm going to change this output here to say encounter. The visibility won't matter so much, but the results would. So I'm going to leave the visibility off. I'm going to go ahead and populate this area with monsters. So I'm going to take the creatures from Rob Tui's book that he'd already set apart, and I'm going to go ahead and link them here. So where it shows the NPCs, that would be the individual creatures, but I'm going to go ahead and do that based off the criteria that he has set forth for the module. So right now he has all these creatures all ready to go. So I'm just going to take some bats from here. Okay. I'm going to take a giant spider. I'm going to take a gnoll. Nah, that's too strong. Oh, here's some more rats. Yeah. You know what? I kind of want Batty the Bat. Where did he go? Okay. My monsters. That's right. Batty the Bat. There he goes. So not all these things are bad. And I actually went to a different section and pulled Batty the Bat to this encounter. Okay, so now we have a table in process. I locked it just to see what it looks like. Looks good. I'm going to unlock it, and I'm going to go ahead and put just label it encounter type. As you can see, this is a 1 through 4. You can change these numbers, the ranges. So let's say I wanted to make this to an 8-sided instead of a 4-sided roll. So now I'm just going to relabel. Okay, so there's your encounter. And now it is an 8-sided. Sometimes this doesn't reflect right away, so you have to lock it. And then it will actually create the correct dice output. It's usually when you edit from scratch and there's not already a number in there this number doesn't change until you lock it. Okay? And now I'm going to roll on this table, because now this is a wandering monster table that I'm going to roll on if the party does not go along with the plot or the storyline. And now I get the encounter of a spider. So now, based on the party's size and toughness, or their CR rating, or the party level, I would adjust this accordingly. I'm going to change it to 3. And I also refresh the CR rating and the XP. Now, that's probably based because there's 3 of them, they're big, they have poison, that's where these numbers come from. And so now I can send these into the combat tracker. However, they're not placed on the map. So if I wanted to place these, I'd have to call up that map, which I have shortcutted. And I can either A, place them ahead of time as a semi kind of encounter, or I can just simply send them over to the combat tracker and then place them on here accordingly. I think I'm going to do the latter. So I'm done making my table. I'm going to close that for now. Here's the spiders. I'm going to make them hostile. Okay, and there's 3 of them. I'm going to go ahead and lock it. And now they're in the combat tracker. And I'm going to say this party member spent way too much time dicking around here in the doorway. The rats didn't do much for them. Didn't scare them. They killed all the rats. I'll just pretend. So now I'm going to put the party members on the map. So you can see they're scaled now. And you were asking about these little numbers here by the portrait. Well, that's 30% or 0.3 of the original. Same thing with that guy. If you want to make them bigger, you can by holding the control button and rolling your mouse wheel in and out. Okay, so now he's at 40%, which looks kind of a little big. Okay, there he goes. All right, so anyways, that's how you rescale your tokens. You click on them, you roll the mouse wheel in and out while holding the control button, and it will resize it. If you don't hold the control button, it will actually roll the character around as a facing. And Fantasy Grounds does support facing. So it'd be an arrow pointing the direction that you're facing. So if you want to get very tactical in fighting, you can turn that option on in the options. Okay, so anyways, there's the 2 guys. As you can see, you can scale it all the way up. You can rotate it, scroll back out. All right. Here they are on the map. All right. They're right there. Spiders are coming. They don't see the spiders, but they might hear them. So I can either drag these one at a time, or in this case, I don't want to do that. So I'm going to just drag this whole thing over. There they are. And I cannot do anything with them because they're not visible. So I need to place them first before I change the visibility again. So I'm going to go ahead and mark them as visible, but they're not visible to the party because it's still masked. Well, at least it was. Okay, so if you notice, they take 4 squares because they're considered large. So the scale of the creature does change if they have the tag large or medium or small. So these are some pretty good sized spiders. Not a very good fight for these guys. Okay, so now they are on the combat tracker. They are not visible to the party yet, so I'm going to go ahead and hide them again. So I changed the visibility to invisible because they're still in the dark. These guys haven't cast enough light. So we'll just say the cleric cast a light spell. Well, he's a dwarf. He could probably see, but let's just say the monk was a human and he had a torch, and that the cleric was out of light spells. And he was the only one who could see. And he says, hey, there's something coming down the hall. This guy says, well, I can't see. He lights a torch. Okay, to reflect the range of the torch, it's usually 20 feet and then a 40 feet of dim light. For this tutorial, I'm just going to show you a little bit how that works. So I'm going to right click on the map. Now the players can do this as well. Click pointers, and then you have 4 different types of pointers. You can draw an arrow, a square, a circle, or a cone. In this case, I'm going to draw a circle for the radius of his torch. So as you can see, the torch has quite a radius. And I went ahead and centered it. I grabbed the center of the radius, dropped it on him, and now you could see where he could see on the map. And it's probably a little bit beyond that because this would be dim light out here. So I'm going to go ahead and unmask this area. So I'm going to go to the layers, go back to the mask mode, and I'm going to unmask this area for this encounter. I have to wait a few seconds because it's too much going on. It's not updating right away. It's because I have too much shared. And that's what I'm saying about your memory resources. It'll really start bogging down when you have a lot of books open. Okay, so now this guy is shared. I know about where the light range is. I think the dwarf can actually see the second one. And then there's the range also. So he can probably see all of them. Anyhow, he's going to move. Okay. That's the torchlight. It's going to move also. But I'm going to get rid of that for now because it's a pain in the butt to manage. Normally, the characters would do their own managing. All right. So now I'm going to get out of the mask mode. Now I'm just in the regular pointer mode. So now these creatures are visible and they are hostile. They're in the party tracker. Okay? And so now we're getting ready to come up to a combat situation. And so I think what we'll do, since it's getting late, is I'm going to actually stop here and make it to where the next session that we do is going to be part 2, where we'll do the combat, and then we'll tie all this stuff together in the module. And then I'll save all this too, so we can start up where we were. We'll get into the actual fight. And I don't want to keep you guys up much longer. It's probably almost midnight, or I'm not sure where you are in your time zone, but that's a lot of information to take in. But I'm going to recap real quick, and we'll get back to this part of it. So before I recap, any questions? Any questions from the stream, chat, anybody? I think 2.5 hours is good for the amount of time. But the main thing I wanted you guys to get from this is organization. So I want you to remember what makes up a module. The story, the quests, the NPCs, the parcels, and actually NPCs does not belong to parcels, the items, Let's see, the items, it's already put up. NPCs, quests, encounters, and the maps, and the quests. Okay, tables. All right. So that is your module in a nutshell. When we come back, we will get into the combat sequence and how to manage that combat. And also, I'm going to show you how to reward your party by using the party sheet. We're going to go over all this stuff and what it means and how the parcels and the encounters and the items tie in with this area. And then we'll start getting into the creative side where we can make a table upon a table where we can create our own tokens and monsters, things like that. So I think the next class is going to finish this tutorial out, and then we're going to get into the creative side. And then I think for the last class, we're actually going to have you start making your own stuff, and I can look it over and we can kind of connect more as a group as opposed to being separated. And throughout the next month or so, I'd like you guys to keep in contact with me or the college and get help with this stuff because it's a lot to take in. But if you know that these are the story elements that make up the story and that you use the groups to keep everything organized, you'll be a lot better off when you're running a campaign or a module. And when you start writing your own, you'll keep this in mind. So is there any questions from the chat?
No, sir. You seem to be clear.
Okay. I want to thank for everyone for showing up. If you want to remain behind and talk to me, I'm going to go back up in the chat room where you guys are all at and camped out and all that sort of stuff. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream and interact with you guys for a few minutes before you go. And we'll call it a night for tonight. And we want to do the same thing for the next couple weeks. So that way, you know, we can get further and deeper into this. I think this is a pretty good chunk of information tonight. So if there's any questions or comments or gripes or bitching or anything like that, let me know, and I'll meet you guys up in the student area where I can talk to you guys and interact, and that's the DMGM student area. So hang out if you have any questions and you want to actually do a live talk to me. I'm going to go ahead and quit the stream. I want to thank my moderators. I want to thank Rob 2E for donating this really cool module. And I want to thank Fantasy Grounds themselves for coming up with really cool software. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and we'll do it again probably next week. See you later.